Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The sky was filled with a fading glow as the last rays of the sun dipped beneath the horizon. In the distance, the peaks of the ancient Dragon Mountains stood tall and imposing, their shadows long and dark, stretching over the vast lands below. Once, these lands had been ruled by the mighty Dragon Clan, an empire of unmatched strength and wisdom. But that was long ago, in a time when dragons soared through the skies and their roars echoed across the continent. Now, the Dragon Clan was a shadow of its former self. Years of internal strife and conflict with other races had weakened them, and many dragons had chosen to live in seclusion, retreating to hidden valleys and remote mountain ranges. The mighty Dragon King, old and weary, knew his time was coming to an end, and with no heir to succeed him, he had made a decision that would change the course of history. For the first time in centuries, the next leader of the Dragon Clan would not be chosen by bloodline, but by election. It was a bold move, one that would allow the strongest, the wisest, or the wealthiest to rise to power. And it was a chance for the Dragon Clan to reclaim its place in the world. Among those vying for the title was a young girl, neither fully dragon nor fully human. Aileen, born of a forbidden union between a dragon and a human, had always been an outsider, caught between two worlds that rarely accepted her. But she believed in something greater than power or wealth, as she believed in the possibility of coexistence between the two races, a vision she hoped would bring peace to a fractured world. As the announcement of the election spread across the land, 3 candidates emerged, each representing a different vision for the future of the Dragon Clan. There was Xiran, the ancient dragon of wisdom, whose knowledge of ancient magic and diplomacy made him a formidable contender. Then there was Volker, the war-hardened dragon warrior, who believed that only strength could restore the dragons to their former glory. Lastly, Lingerie, the cunning dragon of wealth, sought to control the future through economic dominance, promising prosperity and riches to those who supported her. Aileen, with her dreams of unity, was seen as the underdog. But she knew that if the Dragon Clan were to survive, it couldn't be through strength or riches alone. It had to be through understanding and cooperation. With the election approaching, she set out to prove her worth, knowing full well that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and doubt. The Great Dragon Hall, an enormous structure carved from the side of a mountain, was abuzz with activity. Dragons of all sizes and shapes gathered to witness the candidates' first public appearance. Their massive wings stirred the air as they settled on the wide stone platforms, and the ground shook beneath the weight of their collective presence. Among them, a few humans mingled, representatives of various kingdoms who had come to observe the unprecedented event. Aileen stood at the edge of the hall, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the stares of both dragons and humans alike, many of whom still viewed her with suspicion. Her long silver hair, a sign of her mixed heritage, shimmered in the fading light as she took a deep breath and stepped forward. Xiran was the first to speak, his voice deep and resonant, carrying the weight of centuries of knowledge. The future of the Dragon Clan lies not in war or wealth, but in wisdom. We must learn from the past, forge alliances with our neighbors, and rebuild our empire through diplomacy and understanding. His words were met with nods of approval from the older dragons, those who had seen the clans decline firsthand and believed that wisdom was the key to their survival. Aileen knew Xiran was a formidable opponent, one who commanded respect through intellect and experience. But she also knew that his vision, though noble, lacked the boldness needed to address the immediate challenges they faced. Next was Volker, his massive frame casting a shadow over the hall as he spoke with the fierce determination of a warrior. We have grown weak, scattered, and divided. It is time to reclaim what is ours by force. The humans and other races have taken advantage of our decline, and they will continue to do so unless we remind them who the true rulers of this land are. Strength is the only language they understand, and I will lead us to victory. A roar of approval erupted from the younger dragons, those who had grown restless in the years of peace. Volker's vision was one of conquest, a return to the days when dragons ruled through fear and might. Aileen felt a shiver run down her spine. Volker's words stirred something primal in the crowd, something that reminded them of their past power. But she knew that such a path would lead to endless war, a cycle of destruction that would eventually consume them all. Finally, Larry stepped forward, her golden scales gleaming in the torchlight. Power is not found in the battlefield, nor in ancient tomes. It is found in wealth. I have built an empire of trade and riches, and under my leadership, the Dragon Clan will prosper beyond its wildest dreams. We will control the flow of gold and resources, and with that control, we will bend the world to our will. Her words were met with a different kind of approval, a quieter, more calculating nod from those who valued riches over honor. Larry's vision was one of dominance through economic power, a future where dragons held the strings of wealth and influence. But Aileen saw the danger in such a future, where the pursuit of riches could corrupt even the noblest of hearts. Then, it was her turn. Aileen stepped forward, her palms sweating as she faced the gathered crowd. She knew that many of them viewed her as an outsider, a girl with no place in their world. But she had to try. She had to speak for those who believed in something greater than power or wealth. I am not here to speak of strength, wisdom, or wealth, she began, her voice steady despite the nerves coursing through her. I am here to speak of unity. For too long, dragons and humans have lived in fear and mistrust of each other. But I believe that we can change that. I believe that we can build a future where dragons and humans coexist in peace, where we work together to restore the Dragon Clan to its former glory, not through war or riches, but through understanding and cooperation. The hall was silent as her words hung in the air. She could see the doubt in their eyes, the skepticism that had followed her all her life. But she also saw something else, a flicker of hope, a glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. Volker scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Coexistence with humans? You speak like a fool, girl. Humans are weak, and they will only drag us down further into ruin. You are not fit to lead the Dragon Clan. Aileen met his gaze, her eyes burning with determination. Perhaps you're right, Volker. Perhaps I am not fit to lead in the way you or the others would. But I am fit to lead in a way that brings us together instead of tearing us apart. The crowd murmured, divided in their reactions. Some looked at her with admiration, while others still harbored doubt. But Aileen had made her stand, and she knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. As the debates came to a close, the candidates dispersed, each returning to their respective factions to plan their next moves. Aileen walked out of the great dragon hall, her mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. She had allies, though few in number, humans who saw the potential for peace, and a small group of dragons who believed in her vision. But she also had enemies, powerful ones, who would stop at nothing to see her fail. Aileen's breath was shallow as she made her way down the narrow, winding path that led from the great dragon hall. The air was cool against her skin, but her mind burned with the weight of what was to come. The election wasn't just about power, it was about survival. For too long, the Dragon Clan had been teetering on the edge of ruin, and now they stood at a crossroads. She couldn't allow them to fall further, not when she had the chance to change everything. As she approached the small, makeshift camp where her supporters had gathered, she could hear the low murmur of voices. They quieted when she arrived, and all eyes turned to her. There weren't many, just a handful of dragons and humans who believed in her vision. Most were young, dreamers like herself, who dared to imagine a future where peace between the two races was possible. But their numbers were small compared to the vast legions supporting the other candidates. Ronan, a young dragon with bright emerald scales, stepped forward. His wings rustled nervously as he approached. "How did it go, Aileen?" "Did they listen?" Aileen managed a faint smile. "They listened, but they didn't hear." "Not yet, at least." Ronan's expression fell. "It's hard to get them to see things differently, especially Volker. He's rallying more support every day." Some of the older dragons are already talking about pledging their loyalty to him outright. I know, Eileen said, her voice soft. Volker's appeal to strength taps into something deep in the dragon clan. They remember the days when dragons ruled with fear and fire. It's tempting to believe that returning to those ways will fix everything, but it won't. She glanced around at her small group, feeling the weight of their hopes resting on her shoulders. She had to be stronger for them, for the future they all believed in. We have to be patient, she continued. This isn't just a battle of speeches or strength. We're fighting for hearts and minds, and that takes time. Do we have time? Asked one of the humans, a woman named Clara who had joined Eileen's cause after losing her family to a dragon raid years ago. She believed in Eileen's vision of coexistence, but doubt clouded her voice now. Eileen sighed. I don't know, but we have to try. As the night deepened, Eileen found herself alone, sitting on a small stone outcropping that overlooked the vast valley below. The stars were bright in the sky, but their light did little to ease the uncertainty gnawing at her. She had made her stand at the debate, but would it be enough? The Dragon Clan was a proud and stubborn people, and she was asking them to change everything they had ever known. Her thoughts drifted to her mother, a dragon who had fallen in love with the humana love that had led to her exile. Eileen had never known her mother's full story, but she had always felt the weight of it, the way it had shaped her own path. Now, she was trying to bridge the gap between two worlds that had always been divided by fear and mistrust. The wind stirred, carrying with it the faintest whisper of voices, and Eileen looked up, her heart quickening. She knew where she had to go next. The great dragon's graveyard lay deep within the mountains, a place of ancient power and mystery. It was said that the spirits of the old dragon kings still lingered there, watching over the land and judging those who sought their blessing. Few dared to venture there, and even fewer returned. But Eileen had no choice. If she was going to have any chance of winning this election, she needed the blessing of the ancestors. The journey was treacherous, the path winding through narrow cliffs and steep drops. Eileen traveled alone, determined to face the trials that awaited her. As she neared the graveyard, the air grew thick with a strange energy, and the mountains seemed to hum with the voices of the past. At last, she arrived at the entrance, a massive stone archway carved with the likeness of ancient dragons. Beyond it, the ground was littered with the bones of dragons long dead, their once powerful forms reduced to dust and ash. But there was still power here, an overwhelming presence that pressed down on her as she stepped forward. The wind howled, and for a moment, Eileen felt a flicker of doubt. Could she really do this? Could she, a half-blood girl with no claim to power, stand before the ancestors of the Dragon Clan and prove herself worthy? She took a deep breath, steadying herself. There was no turning back now. As she walked deeper into the graveyard, the air grew colder, and shadows seemed to shift in the corners of her vision. The ground beneath her feet crunched with the weight of centuries of history, and the silence was heavy, oppressive. Then, without warning, a voice echoed through the air, deep and ancient. Who dares to enter the sacred graveyard of the Dragon Kings? Eileen froze, her heart racing. The voice was not humana, it was something far older, far more powerful. I am Eileen, she called out, her voice trembling slightly. I come seeking the blessing of the ancestors. The ground rumbled beneath her feet, and the air crackled with energy. Suddenly, before her, a massive form materialized, an ethereal dragon, its scales shimmering with a light that seemed to come from within. Its eyes, glowing like molten gold, bore down on her. The blessing of the ancestors is not given lightly, the dragon intoned, its voice reverberating through the ground. You must prove yourself worthy. Eileen swallowed hard, her palms sweating. I'm ready. The dragon's eyes narrowed, and without another word, the ground beneath Eileen shifted. She was plunged into darkness, her body weightless as she fell through a void. For a moment, she felt utterly alone, the silence pressing in on her from all sides. Then, with a jarring thud, she landed on solid ground. She was no longer in the graveyard. Instead, She found herself standing in the middle of a battlefield, the sky dark and stormy above her. All around her, dragons and humans fought, their roars and cries filling the air. It was chaos, blood and fire everywhere. Eileen's heart pounded in her chest. She recognized this scene. It was the Battle of Orinder, one of the bloodiest conflicts in the history of the dragon clan. Her mother had fought in this battle, and it had been one of the events that had led to the eventual exile of the dragons from the human lands. But this wasn't just a memory. This was her trial. Suddenly, a massive dragon descended from the sky, its eyes locked on her. It was Volker, or rather, a shadow of him. He was larger than life, his scales gleaming like molten iron, his wings stretching wide as he let out a deafening roar. "You are weak," the dragon growled, its voice filled with malice. "You think you can stand against me? Against the power of the dragon clan?" Eileen stood her ground, her fists clenched. "I don't have to fight you," she said, her voice steady. "Strength isn't the only path," the dragon snarled, its eyes blazing with fury. It lunged at her, its claws outstretched, but Eileen didn't move. Instead, she reached deep within herself, calling on the power of her heritage, the power of both dragon and human. A brilliant light erupted from her chest, and the dragon stopped in its tracks, blinded by the glow. Eileen stood tall, her eyes glowing with a fierce determination. The future of the dragon clan isn't in war, it's in unity. The battlefield around her dissolved, and Eileen found herself back in the graveyard, the ethereal dragon still watching her. Its eyes, once cold and judgmental, now softened. "You have passed the trial," the dragon said, its voice quieter now. "The ancestors see your strength not in battle, but in your heart. You have their blessing." Eileen felt a warmth spread through her, a sense of peace she hadn't known before. The weight of doubt lifted, replaced by a certainty that she was on the right path. When she returned to the Great Dragon Hall, word of her journey had already spread. Dragons and humans alike whispered of her visit to the graveyard, of the blessing she had received from the ancestors. It was a powerful symbol, one that could sway the election in her favor. But Volker was not finished. On the day of the election, just as the votes were about to be cast, he issued a challenge, a duel, one that would prove, once and for all, who was truly worthy to lead. Eileen accepted, knowing that this would be the final test. The battle was fierce, Volker's strength and size overwhelming, but Eileen had something he didn't to balance. She moved with grace, dodging his blows and using her agility to outmaneuver him. In the end, it wasn't brute force that won the day, but strategy and heart. When Volker fell, defeated and humiliated, the crowd erupted in cheers. Eileen, breathing heavily, stood victorious. The votes were cast, and when the final tally was announced, Eileen was declared the new leader of the Dragon Clan. It was the beginning of a new era, one of unity, peace, and understanding. Eileen knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but with the blessing of the ancestors and the support of those who believed in her vision, she was ready to lead.